everyone. We have an exclusive interview with a very interesting person, Dr. John Goodyear. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Adnan.
My name is Khattab-Adnan-al-Khattab and I'm originally from Bangladesh.
Wow.
Now I'm studying at Almaty Kazakhstan University and my major is journalism.
Mm-hmm.
When I was looking information about you,
Yeah.
in LinkedIn profile you have like a lot of things and I was like quite surprised.
Mm-hmm.
So to start the interview, could you please tell brief information about yourselves to our viewers?
So, as you rightly said, I've got a lot of experience. We would use the idiom under my belt, which simply means a lot of experience. And this experience comes in different forms. The first of which is teaching. So I am a teacher.
Yeah.
The second of which is through communications. So I have my own kind of a company, I suppose. So I do a lot of work with German communication. I'm a German specialist by trade. And also I have in the past done a television documentary. So I have television experience work as well. So all of that together, Adnan, means that I'm a teacher, I'm a communicator, interculturally, because I do a lot of work in Germany, though I'm originally from the UK. And also on top of that, I've got this experience in the understanding and the imparting of understanding of different cultures in the university context, in the university space. So that's me, Adnan.
Yeah. So, Dr. Goodyear, you have had an impressive academic journey. For example, PhD from University of London and MA from German Cultural Studies from Aston University. What inspired you to delve in this field?
So German is, or was I should say, a subject that was compulsory in all secondary schools. So that's the schooling between the ages of 11 and 16 in England and Wales. It stopped being compulsory, but I went through the system when you had to learn a foreign language, and the foreign language offered at the school that I attended was German. There was also French there as well, but I chose German and just went right through the system. So I did German up to A level, so the qualification just before you get to university. And I was always interested in German history, initially in the Second World War, German history in the era of Hitler. But as I embarked on this German language, German cultural journey, my interest grew ever wider. It grew in areas of art, in culture, also in German philosophy and German literature. So much so that I embarked on a degree. You've already listed the other two degrees at Aston University. So it was really a school interest, an interest in this particular subject, in this particular language at school. Being good at it is also really important. And then following on from schooling and following that interest, following that passion, I went on to do a bachelor's, a master's and a PhD in German or in German cultural studies.
Yes, so you're quite the expert in intercultural communication. Yes, so just to imagine that in Kazakhstan we have a lot of ethnicities, a lot of language, it's a multilingual country. So how do you think language act as a matchmaker in this type of situation? For example, we have Russian speaker, English speaker, Kazakh speaker, so how it's work?
So I think the key buzzword here is the intercultural, and actually in a space like Kazakhstan, it moves out of the intercultural because you're dealing with many more cultures. We can talk about the transcultural. So this is where multiple cultures come together, they interact with one another. And I mean, I've been in Kazakhstan for around about 2.5 days now, and I can see that communication happens, but it happens in a way, as you rightly said, that is multilingual and also multicultural. So this is a multi-ethnic, multicultural, diverse population. And you have a variety of languages in this space. Kazakh, obviously the national language of Kazakhstan. Russian, a really important part of this country's linguistic map. We call the space a map for the time being, as well as other languages that are spoken within this space. including English, for example, which is seeing growth and has seen quite a bit of growth over the last few years. So it is a matchmaker, and it's interesting to see how a lot of code switching happens. So someone will be speaking in Kazakh, but I know a few words of Russian to know that the Russian comes into it, and it is understood. And this multilingual space that you have with multilingual people allow for this understanding to happen, to be facilitated. The more the merrier, I say. So the more people understand the different languages in this space, it adds to greater understanding, greater appreciation, and greater respect for each other's, not for one single culture, though here the Kazakh culture is very, very important and is central to national life, but also the other cultures that have informed Kazakh culture over the many, many years since the foundation of this particular country.
So, like, I want to share my experience in Kazakhstan. When I came here first, I asked people like, I am first Bangladeshi, so I don't have that much information that I can survive here.
Okay.
So, if, for example, if I went in any magazine, I asked people like, do you know English? They're saying that, oh, I don't know English. And for example, in university, in different places, they can speak with me, but there's if I ask help from them, okay, can you help me, please? They're saying that, oh, I don't know English. So it's proved that a lot of people knows English, but for the lack of confidence, sometimes maybe they don't want to speak in English. So it's like creating, for example, in Germany, I heard the same situation in some cases. So how do you think that like some people don't want to change their language, like native language, they always want to speak in native language. So it's very difficult for foreigners or like different peoples. So how do you think the situation?
I think that you shouldn't force people, first of all. So if it is their choice, it is their individual choice to speak their native language. We can't impose multiculturalism, multilingualism on individuals who perhaps are so proud of their culture that they really want to continue living that culture. I think what we have to do is find a happy medium. And the happy medium is, how do we facilitate transnational, transcultural communication?
Okay.
So if you are a Bangladeshi student, as you are, and then you've come from Bangladesh to Kazakhstan, the question is the understanding of the culture that is now going to be your home for a certain period of time. How much preparation can you do, and how much common ground, for example, can you find between Kazakh culture and Bangladeshi culture? There's actually more in common than meets the eye. So as opposed to saying, right, individual X who is very proud of, let's say, being Kazakh and doesn't want to speak another language, let's say it's English or let's say it's Russian, for somebody to come in from the outside, there has to be a certain level of tolerance and a certain level of trying to find common ground. Now that might mean you as the guest in the culture will have to find that common ground, because you are being given the skills of being exposed to this international setting. And it's for you also to do that hard work and understand what is it that is special about Kazakh culture, what is it that's special about Kazakh literature, what is it that will create a connection with that Kazakh person, but also has a connection with, let's say, Bangladesh. And I think if you can find that common intercultural ground, and there is a way of communicating it. It could be, as the Germans would say, with Hände und Füße, with your hands and feet. But if you show someone respect towards their culture, what you might then find, and in some cases you will probably find it quite a bit, is that they will give ground as well. And they will be happy that you've accepted that that's their culture. They will be happy too that you are attempting to understand where they're coming from. and then to ensure for some form of intercultural dialogue and communication that you can use this common ground and then move forward with the communication. I'm not saying that this is easy. I'm not saying that we should impose, right, all Kazakh people now must learn French, or all Kazakh people must learn German. Some people will not see the relevance for it in their daily lives. So I think, Adnan, what I would say is, for those entering into a culture who are guests, have an understanding of the culture, which is going to be your place, which is going to be your home for, it could be for a short time, it could be for a year, it could be for longer. And try your best. Obviously, it might not be possible to learn fluent Kazakh. I don't think I could learn Kazakh in 5 years, let alone 2 or 3 years that you're here. But it's about cultural appreciation. It's about taking matters into your own hands with regards to learning about another culture, and then expressing a desire, an admiration, an interest to find out more from the other and make those common bonds, make those common connections.
Let's move into education sector in Kazakhstan. So Kazakhstan promotes a trilingual education system, for example, Russian, Kazakh, and English. So given you expertise, what strategies do you think are the most important for the students to learn a lot of languages at the same time?
Now that's a very good question, because you're not necessarily asking an expert, in that I only learn German, but I'll let you know what I think. Learning a language is an individual pursuit to each person. So this means that you have to go out there and find what method, what strategy works for you. Now, what we can do as institutions, we can, and I talk as someone who works in the UK higher education sector, we can facilitate, we can put in the groundwork, so to speak, to enable communication to take place. Because after all, you're here because of the university. The university has said, right, this is a space where we need to be trilingual, and we need to be trilingual so that we can appeal to Kazakh students domestically, Russian speaking students domestically, but also further afield in Russian speaking countries and also in Russia, and also English as an international language that we can reach out to countries like Bangladesh, which has a history of speaking English. So we now have this trilingual mission of the university space in Kazakhstan. It's about the individual student taking matters into his or her own hands, or their own hands, but it's also about the university creating a space that's conducive for the trilingual. So what does that mean? It means signs. Very, very simple. So are signs in Kazakh? Are they in Russian? Are they in English? So a trilingual space would aim to have signs in those languages. This is not to say that we're undermining one language or we're seeing another language as more important. You're trying to see them as equals within a space so that you have a certain degree of inclusivity. The problem with that is, however, if you do that, then you run the risk of, let's say, an English speaker looking just at the English side and not looking at the Russian side and not looking at the Kazakh side. So even though this is a strategy, it can be undermined by the eye going towards the language that he, she, or they are most familiar with, which is something that could actually be a step backwards when it comes to language learning. So that's one practical piece of advice, let's call it a strategy for namesake, that we could use to advance the trilingual system. Another one would be to have materials, teaching, learning materials in the 3 languages, but this would put a huge onus on the staff. It would put a huge onus too on the students, because you will then have a situation that students would have to do things in 2 languages. But for them, if they were to put in the hard work, after graduation, they were to go out into the world and know Kazakh and know Russian and know English, I think they would be set up for life. So there are downsides behind some of the couple of strategies that I've just put forward there, but I think if the students put in that hard work, they appreciate the culture in which they are currently finding themselves studying inside, operating inside, but also the Russian as well. I would really promote the use of Russian, Kazakh, and English, and to see and feel the similarities and the differences between them. So onus is on the student. The universities have a role to play in facilitating, in supporting it, and some practical steps there, signs, learning materials, teaching materials that could help facilitate that trilingual mission of the Kazakh internationalized space that is this
so
university.
If I speak particularly on Al-Farabi Kazakh National University, it's very well renowned in Kazakhstan, and a lot of foreign students every year came here. So like we have a lot of students from different backgrounds.
Yes.
For example, Afghan, Bangladeshi. How can we leverage the diverse culture to enhance their language and cultural studies program in Al-Farabi Kazakh?
Now that too is a very good question. It's one that requires considerable thinking. So each language is special. It's special because it has its uniqueness, and the people who speak it subscribe and adhere to a particular culture where that language is spoken. And to retain this value, the university, of course, has an obligation and a duty to respect the cultural diversity of all of the people who are coming here, be they Bangladeshi speakers like yourself, or be they Dari speakers from Afghanistan, but also to make those connections between the cultures. Now, what can you do as an individual? What can you do as a community? What can you do as a university here at Al-Farabi to facilitate those connections? So I know that my colleague, Professor Almash Sadikanova, she has done fantastic work in leveraging that by, for instance, showcasing the different cultures, bringing people together, for instance, around the table, breaking bread, as we say, or in the English language, or where you meet around a table to exchange food. And that's one of the cultural reference points where we can collectively come together, and you will get these moments of meeting, of greeting, of making connections, of making networks. And the individual students can start to see their own, in this case, cuisine, in comparison with other cuisines, interlink them. And in doing so, you then harbour and foster connections between, let's say, a Dari speaker and a Bangladeshi speaker. And once you do that, and this is then multiplied, it's quadrupled, it's gone into the X factor, just to use the word, the X degree, then you start to have a very interesting, dynamic, diverse experience among both the students. But if staff are watching this, especially as they've facilitated it, you are going to get a staff to student to student to staff and a student to student exchange. And to go back to your question in terms of how do you leverage it, this represents for the university cultural capital. It's cultural capital that students will take with them. It becomes part of their DNA in the cultural sense. And after they finish universities, they will be the representatives of Al-Farabi. But Al-Farabi is a space that is intercultural, transcultural, that have brought these cultures together. And coming back full circle, if they've had a positive experience with this kind of trilingual, multilingual, multi-ethnic, diverse community, and go out into the wider world and have something to say about it, then for the university this could be leveraged, because you create an alumni So a group of people who are proud to say, I went to Al-Farabi, I learned not just this one language, I was operational and fluent in other languages, and they were respected. And this is the kind of world that the university, not just here in Kazakhstan, but universities right around the world seek to aspire. They aspire to creating communities where learners are valued, and that means their culture is valued, their language is valued. If they can then leave the country and let's say they go off into the wider world, that they can represent Al-Farabi in a very positive light.
You have involved in many volunteer works. For example, I saw a lot of works. So my question is, how has your volunteer works influenced your perspective on education and cultural exchange?
I think voluntary work is very, very important. It's important for so many different reasons, so many different factors. A couple of examples from myself and my background. So I started off actually teaching voluntarily. I went back to my old secondary school and I saw the power for voluntary work and what it gives to the individual, but also to the wider community. It also helped me to understand how to teach. Fast forward a few years, and I've done work in volunteering for a society, an intercultural society that brings German and Chinese cultures together. I was the chairman of the Deutsch-Chinesische Gesellschaft in German, so the German-Chinese Society of Friendship, Freundschaftsgesellschaft, so a society of friends. And I had this role for about 4 years, and in the course of this role, we had Chinese singers come to Germany and perform in the local beautiful Schlossgarten, these beautiful grand castle gardens in the city, with which I have so much in common, not least as I've lived there for the past 15 years. And knowing that culture might not necessarily have the capital, the money that it really requires and deserves. And this means that we have to be reliant on voluntary contributions. That could be voluntary financial contributions, but also voluntary actions in terms of people giving their time. I give a lot of time to this cause because it's one close to my heart. It's intercultural. It brings people together, and it brings them together in such a way that we create moments that people remember, and they have impact on individuals, on groups, and also onto the wider community, especially when it comes to appreciating, gaining awareness and intercultural awareness, and also an understanding of the commonalities between Chinese, in my particular case here, Chinese and German culture, bringing those two together so that we can build on the friendship that is very much felt by the people participating in such projects. And this is so important, especially in a world that might be in the future. We don't know how the future is going to materialize, but could well be a bit more antagonistic, a bit more confrontational. Social media creates a huge space where a lot of information is populated, but it's usually information that's cut down to the shortest possible headline. People don't have time to digest, the ins and outs, the nuances of stories. So the job of a intercultural practitioner, a person working voluntarily, is to try and create moments of understanding, of appreciation, of friendship. And this is something that can really diffuse tension, it can reduce tension, so that we have a hope of having a more prosperous and peaceful world.
We worked in both China and Germany together. So can you share a funny moment, that cultural misunderstanding that you have encountered in your career?
In China, well, there were plenty of misunderstandings. But one that I was actually quite proud of, thinking back, was an invitation to a New Year's celebration. And my Chinese is not very good, so I was asked today a question in a lecture in full Chinese. I understood that they wanted to ask a question, but I didn't understand the actual question itself. But my Chinese is, I would say Pidgin Chinese is quite basic Chinese. And I was in a village with around about 1,000 people in a hall, and I was the VIP, the guest from England. And I walked in, and all of these eyes focused on me because I obviously was not from this village. Many people hadn't seen someone from outside of this village, so I was quite the exotic figure. And there was a performance on stage, and in the middle of the performance was stopped, and they asked me to stand up and turn around and say something to the audience. And I was really put on my feet, so I turned around, stood up, and I had this huge microphone that blared into this big hall with all of these people watching me, predominantly men actually, come to think of it. And I said in English, Happy New Year, in English. Nothing. There was no response whatsoever. And I was in the process of handing back the microphone to the interpreter. And it suddenly occurred to me, I know the Chinese for Happy New Year. It's Xin Yin Kuai Le. So I grabbed the microphone back and I went as loud as I could and almost very revolutionary. I went, Xin Yin Kuai Le. And all of a sudden, the applause, all of these people clapping in chorus went to show me you do need to have some smattering of a language. English didn't work. The Chinese obviously did. I was in their culture. I needed to speak more Chinese than really I actually got to learn. And it was a moment that I take with me in terms of the respect for another culture. You know, have a try at the language. You're going to make many mistakes, but the trying is worth it.
Let's move into the journalism.
Yeah.
Okay, as a journalist, if you want to work in a multilingual country like Kazakhstan, how do you think language is very important? For example, if I know Russian, Kazakh, and English is very important to work in a multilingual country.
I totally agree. I think not only that, it is a skill. I say a skill as if it's a singular, but you have so many different skills when you are multilingual. And to leverage that later on is going to be something that is going to be more required of journalists in the future. So journalists are vitally important conveyors of knowledge. They inform their audiences on whatever topic it is that they are reporting. But they also have a duty to understand deeply what they are reporting on. If you have more foreign languages at your disposal, you can be deployed in many more countries than if you just have the one language. That's the first thing. The second thing is, if you have a deeper understanding of different cultural spaces and you are deployed in a completely different cultural space to the ones that you know, you can make connections with those other cultures, and that could lead to brand new insights that perhaps others might not be reporting. So the multilingual, the multicultural journalist, someone who is an individual who can speak many languages, talk to many people, can reach out and connect to more people than, let's say, the mono, the singular, the one. Let's say that's just English. It confines you just to an English-speaking world, but also to other spaces that might have English as their lingua franca. But it would be better, let's say, an example is Bangladesh. If you have a Bangladeshi background, but your English is of the same level, you are going to be able to interpret what's going on the ground in Bangladesh better than someone who doesn't know about Bangladesh. So in this regard, in journalism, the more languages, the merrier. You have an ability to speak the language and to understand the language, and the way that you deliver it has more power. It's like if I say the word Afghanistan, how do you say Afghanistan?
Afghanistan.
Afghanistan. So an individual who is from Afghanistan might say it in a slightly different intonated way. And if you are able to build that in, there's a BBC journalist called Michelle Hussein, and she does a very good job at this because she is someone who has learned that language and can transport that into her own reporting. It gives it more of an authentic feel. It gives it more flavour. It gives it more value and substance because you are putting that pronunciation of just that one word of how I would say Afghanistan or Afghanistan. You just feel this person knows it, this person understands it, and much more deeper or deeply than someone who perhaps doesn't know.
Let's move into the social media. Okay. I'm very interested in this topic. Day by day, the landscape of media is changing the whole world. For example, in Russia, if you see particular Alexei Navalny, was very popular in social media. Even in India, Dhruvarati, they have millions of views and people are really like to watching them. So if a particular person nowadays, a lot of person are shifting in journalism, mini journalism or blogging. So how do you think after 5 years or 10 years, like how the situation will be like?
So this represents a major challenge for traditional journalism. So let's say the traditional journalism of these big news organizations, the BBCs, the CNNs of the world, they are having to think more critically about the use of social media. The use of social media has exploded, as you've rightly said, in recent years. What you see in social media is initially it was to connect to individuals. It moved into a space of the communication of information, and for many people it is a news source. The question is going to be, for a critically minded person, the one department or section of news organizations now that look at the validity of what is on social media, the verification of what is on social media, because traditional journalism has the added advantage of being checked, particularly journalism of a reputable, international reputable level. It has to be checked once, twice, 3 times over to make sure what is being reported is the truth. Now that takes some time. It takes the journalist time to check, to double check, to triple check. Right, now I can report it. Social media has the luxury of not doing all of this. It just reports it.
Safe?
It's not safe. That's going to be one of the big issues of the future. If the news is then reported on social media and it's reported as this is what's happening, this is fact, people absorb it. The danger is that at some later stage it turns out that this is not necessarily the case. Now I'm not saying that everything that is reported on the BBC is 100%, but they reach a very, very high standard of accuracy because it is checked, double checked, triple checked before it's being reported. Social media doesn't do this. Social media puts it out there. The role of those traditional organizations then will be to validate, to verify what is being reported on social media, and this is now happening. So what I see in the future is a continuation of the spread of information, the spread of information to a whole range of people. As long as they've got a phone, as long as they've got an internet connection, they will create various channels for themselves, because algorithms obviously channel information to individual users' phones. They absorb that information. But the question is, what we need to do in the university space is ensure that we have critically minded people and that the general public is critically minded, so that they look at what is being reported with a critical eye, just like with the reporting of mainstream media. Look at it with a critical eye and assess what is being said, who is saying it, what's the register, what's the tone, is it professional? All of those sorts of questions need to be in the back of people's minds and not necessarily believe, right, this is from social media, this is the truth. So it's going to be a big challenge for traditional media. Traditional media is struggling because of the rise and the growth of social media journalism, the rise and the growth of individuals who are subscribing to this form of journalism. Those journalists are becoming big names, as big as big names in the traditional media. I don't think one will completely collapse and the other one will completely take its place. So there's going to be this relationship in the future between the traditional and the social media news output and feed. And this is something that your generation, I'm probably about 20 years older than yourself, this is something that you are going to live with long after I've gone.
Let's move into your translator part.
Okay.
You're a translator and I'm very interested in German language.
Mm-hmm.
So what's your favorite German word that doesn't have exact meaning in English?
Whoa, that's a question, Adnan. Right, one word. So the German language, first of all, is a very noun-based language. They have lots and lots of nouns.
Okay.
German is a language, unlike English, where you can stack nouns together. You can make compounds, yeah, just like in science. So if you've got one word here, bring them together. You've got one word, but it's a compositive or composite of two words, and you can keep doing this to get a really long word. So you can have words of, I don't know, 67 letters. One word that springs to mind that is a compound of two is the word Schaden and the word Freude. And this word Schadenfreude is in the English dictionary. It's managed to make its way into the English dictionary. And it means the translation of this word is, so this is one word in German, taking pleasure out of somebody else's misfortune.
It's very interesting.
That's seven words you need for this one translation in from German into English. Okay, so Schadenfreude, taking pleasure out of somebody else's misfortune. That's the word I'll give you.
Thanks for your insight. It's really amazing for me to take an interview from you. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thanks very much, Adnan.
Yeah, goodbye for everyone.
Goodbye.